Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Spicy Web. Sorry for that crazy opening, but I've had an interesting day. I thought I would channel a little bit of my frustration with people on the interwebs into a bit of a lighthearted but still hopefully informative look at the controversy that continues around Tailwind. Yes, we're back there once again. We're talking about Tailwind CSS. We're talking about utility classes. And what I thought I would do is just read out a tweet that I posted earlier today, and then some of the backlash. I got fairly roasted by a few people, and I thought I would respond to that in a little bit of a lighthearted manner, but really use that as a jumping off point to talk about some of these topics that continue to be relevant to all of us as web developers. So let's just jump right into it. So earlier today, I posted this on Twitter in response to Adam Wathan. Well, I'll read to you what he said first. Of course, I couldn't directly quote tweet him because he blocked me a while back. I was a little surprised that he blocked me, to be honest, because I never really had any sort of altercation with Adam on Twitter. I think he just heard about me and the fact that I'd written an article that went viral that was somewhat negative of Tailwind, although I think done in a fairly respectful way. I really just voiced my frustration in the article that I kept getting attacked by Tailwind fans, and I didn't like that. But by apparently saying that, Adam didn't like it. So I am blocked by Adam on Twitter. So I took a picture of his tweet and responded to that. So Adam says here, he has this mythical person who's telling him, just write CSS. And then he's like, ugh. And he says, I would literally write the exact same CSS that Tailwind generates for me, ya goof, because the workflow of styling directly in your markup is what I care about, not avoiding learning CSS. So this part where he says the workflow of styling directly in your markup. You know, every time I hear people talk about this, every time people go into this whole spiel around, we don't need the separation of concerns anymore. Keeping your style sheet separate from your markup is causing more problems than it solves. You should just commingle all this stuff. It just drives me bonkers to no end. But particularly for someone like Adam, with the cachet that he has and the popularity of Tailwind, it continues to surprise me that he doesn't present a nuanced, reasonable argument around this. Like, he could have said, hey, some people have good reasons to keep their styling separate from their markup, and they have logical reasons for doing so, and I respect that, but it's not really my thing. I like this other approach. But no, he keeps setting up these straw man arguments, and that's what drives me bonkers. And all of the hardcore Tailwind fans out there keep setting up all of these different straw man arguments. It's so frustrating. Anyway, so what I wrote in response to that is the workflow of styling directly in your markup was rightly rejected by the creators of web specs and a thoughtful dev community decades ago. This entire project is setting the web back, all because of one man's ego and a corporation built around it. And that's really the problem here, folks, because the reason Adam can't say something more nuanced and more, appreciating approaches other than Tailwind is because he's built an entire company around promoting Tailwind, teaching everyone Tailwind, wanting everyone to continue using Tailwind and buying Tailwind products. It is this whole cycle of commerce that he is in. I have a big problem with this in a lot of different spheres, not just technology and certainly not just Tailwind. I have been vocal about things like in religion, where pastors of large megachurches have a vested interest to keep promoting a particular theology of the megachurch, because if they say anything against it, they're out of a job, the church falls apart. It's this whole thing, right? And, it's often not even their fault. Like, there's a real problem of church leaders who want to get out of the particular thing they've gotten into, and they don't know how, and it's kind of a tragedy. But that is a total digression here. So Back to the topic at hand. Anyway, this tweet obviously ruffled some feathers, so I'm going to read you some of the things that got written to me. I'm going to anonymize the names pretty much here because I'm not here to, intentionally pick on anyone or incite a Twitter mob, but I'm just going to read you these snippets I have here. So let's start with this one by an HG. If you think by saying styling directly into your markup he refers to is the same workflow that was rejected by the creators of web specs and a thoughtful dev community, you have never ever truly learned/used Tailwind CSS the way you should have. Well, I'm sorry. Apparently, the way you use Tailwind and learn Tailwind is not how I learned and used it, and that must be why I'm wrong. This is a fallacious argument. It's basically saying, if you learned and used this technology that I like the way that I think it should be learned, you would like it. That is dumb. That argument never works for anything. Somebody could come along and say, I think fried pork ribs taste awful. And someone else could say, well, if you'd had the proper kind of fried pork ribs that was baked, what's the word? That was barbecued by this particular restaurant that does it just right, then you would love it. Like, that's just a fallacious argument. It's not even worth giving any weight to. Like, no. All right, moving on to the next one by DS. This one's talking about like using vanilla CSS or using vanilla JS. So this person says, plain CSS, just like vanilla JS, are terribly inefficient. This is like saying, just walk there when cars and bikes exist. That argument's not going to work with me, folks, because I actually do walk pretty much anywhere and everywhere because I live in Portland. And at the moment, I don't even have a car. So, just walk there. Moving right along, a JDH says, utility classes are not inline styles. They are, in fact, classes. I invite you to check the actual CSS style sheet that gets loaded in on a Tailwind project. Another one of these. You need to go actually look at what Tailwind does because you're not describing it properly. Listen, folks, people who are fans of Tailwind get really bent out of shape when anyone talks about inline styles, because supposedly inline styles are bad, but Tailwind classes are good because they're not inline styles. And I find that entire line of argumentation utterly tiring and just worn out because, first of all, the style attribute's actually pretty cool. And with CSS variables, it has a whole new range of superpowers. I've always been rather a fan of using the style attribute. I've used it even in the past in places where I felt really dirty and bad. Like I was a bad developer for using style because everyone says don't use it. There's plenty of good reasons to use the style attribute. And there's plenty of good reasons not to use utility classes. They're apples and oranges. It's not really worth arguing about one way or another. There are plenty of other reasons not to like Tailwind that have nothing to do with if something is like inline styles or not. Moving right along to MK. Using Tailwind alongside a proper build/transform system like Post CSS is just so handy. I've had a pretty damn good experience with it. And also I work on projects with more than thousands of unique users per day using Tailwind with no problem. I don't understand this because I don't think anyone is arguing that using Tailwind means that users can't access a website properly. That's not one of the arguments. Nobody out there is saying, oh, if you use Tailwind CSS, users can't access your site. No, that's not what anyone is saying. Thousands of people can access a website that's been built using Tailwind. I'm sure millions of users can access a website that's been built with Tailwind. This is a non-argument. But if you have had a good experience using Tailwind and you're pretty happy with it, then good for you. Moving right along to VK, I really don't understand this first sentence. He didn't have a gun to millions of people's heads? Millions of people's heads. I think it's supposed to be. Huh? I think what this person is trying to say is that apparently millions of people, I don't know where you're getting that statistic, apparently millions of people are using Tailwind and love it, and Adam didn't have a gun to their heads to make them like it, so it's good. Again, a non-argument. And then continuing on, VK says, Tailwind is much better at writing and scaling CSS than any other type of system. Oh, really? You've used every type of system on the planet for writing and scaling CSS. You've used all of them. You've spent weeks, months, perhaps even years writing websites using all kinds of different methods of writing and scaling CSS. You've done them all, and you have found out through trial and error and much experience that Tailwind is much better than any of the other ones. Come on. Come on. That's just not, again, a non-argument. There's no way you can make that claim. There is simply no way you can make that claim, because at any moment, someone can come along, perhaps even right now, as I'm recording this, someone can come along with a new method of writing and scaling CSS. How can you say that Tailwind is better than that when you haven't even tried it yet? This is like one of those things that's like, this musician is a better violinist than any other violinist that exists on the planet today. I'm not making that up. Somebody actually told me that once. Somebody told me that a person they liked who was a fiddle player, a folk musician, a folk fiddle player, not only were they the best fiddle player anywhere, but they might even be the best instrumentalist alive. Really, you've heard every single person on the planet who plays the violin or plays folk music, you've heard them all, every single one, and you can conclusively say that this person you like is the best. Come on. Come on, folks. Come up with better arguments. I don't mind having an argument with someone who has good arguments. Come up with some good arguments, and then we can have an actual conversation. These are non-arguments. It gets worse. It gets worse, folks. MH says, he, that is Adam, he wouldn't have been able to build the corporation if his solution didn't work for a lot of people. I hate to break it to you, but lots of people build lots of companies selling lots of products and make lots of money selling those products, and those products are terrible, and the people who buy them are getting fooled. Grifts are everywhere, and perhaps millions of people are buying into the grifts. We see this in politics everywhere right now in America. It's a huge problem. So to say, oh, this solution is good because it's popular. No. Technology solutions are not good because they're popular. Popularity, here, I don't know how to stress this enough, folks. Popularity is not an indication of a good technology solution. Ever, period, I rest my case. It's just not. Technology is good or bad based on the merits of the technology once you investigate the technology and understand the technology and compare that technology to other technologies. Then you can talk about the merits. You can talk about the pros and cons of one technology over another. Popularity has nothing to do with it. And on to the last one here, folks, by an NPL. They say, I'm not a code god, guru, ninja, or know-it-all. What I do know, though, is that Tailwind CSS makes hashtag my website life. What is that? Hashtag my website life infinitely and unmeasurably easier. With infinitely and unmeasurably. I'm not making this up. Infinitely and unmeasurably better end results. And it seems the same for thousands of others too. So I thank you, Adam Wathan. I thank you. I had to check on a couple of these to make sure it wasn't like a bot, like a pro-Tailwind bot that just like goes around and has like a standard list of things. It's just like, oh, post a pro-Tailwind thing here, post a pro-Tailwind thing there, searching Twitter for mentions of Tailwind and like boop, boop, boop. Who talks like this? infinitely and unmeasurably easier. Infinitely and unmeasurably. I mean, I like a lot of things too. I like Ruby. I like Rails. I like Lit for building web components. I can't think of anything that's made my life infinitely and unmeasurably easier and better. What? I'm a huge Apple fan. I don't think I would tell anybody the iPad Pro has made my life infinitely and unmeasurably easier. Here's the problem, folks. There's a thing called the web. The web is made up of a number of open specifications. These open specifications are worked on by a number of people that are part of working groups, that are part of groups that are, come from different companies and different organizations that come together to determine, the relevance and the merit of different proposals. Sometimes browser engines, one particular engine will implement a particular thing, perhaps behind a flag, and then, see what the reaction to that is. And different browsers influence other browsers in different ways, and specs get worked on over many, many years. And the web incrementally moves forward in a way that is largely backwards compatible. It's a very bad thing to introduce something wildly different on the web that's going to change everything that's come before. So when we look at the web, we see an evolution over many, many years, decades, an evolution of thought, an evolution of approaches that all are kind of building on top of each other. So HTML, particularly CSS recently, JavaScript, they get incrementally better, and they give us incrementally more power and sophistication with less hassle. So perhaps if you went back, say, 10 years and said, you should just use vanilla CSS for everything, people would have some grounds to kind of laugh at that and say, like, well, CSS has some real problems. But things change over time, and CSS gets better. The vanilla specs get better, but they also get better in ways that are compatible with the reason those specs exist in the first place. There's a reason HTML is HTML. There's a reason markup languages are markup languages. There's a reason CSS exists. There's a reason people wanted to style markup using something other than markup. There are reasons for the way the web is built. There are reasons for the way people have done things on the web for a long time. And you may disagree with some of those reasons, but you can't dismiss those reasons. You got me? You can not like some of the things that are part of vanilla specs. You can point to certain things and say, I don't really like that. I'm happy to point stuff out. I think it's ridiculous that to have a link that goes somewhere, it's an A tag, but to have a button you can click on is a button tag. But to have a thing that looks like a button that links somewhere can't be a button tag that's inside of a link tag or something to that effect. Over and over again, we struggle with having link buttons. It's a big mess, right? I have pointed that out that I don't like that, okay? I wish, you could either put an href attribute directly on button or, make the A tag have a, I don't know, acts like a button attribute of some kind. I don't know. But I just wish that links and buttons were much more aligned semantically and we didn't have to keep doing these wacky things to have links that look like buttons that aren't the same as buttons. Whatever. My point is we can point to specific things in the web specs and say, it feels kind of janky. I wish, it could work this other way. But to just kind of act like the specs don't matter, we don't need to care about them, you can't really use them and build real applications, using some other framework that turns things upside down and backwards and in and out and basically says the people that use the specs really don't know the right way to do things. We have the right solution that you should adopt. And if you don't like our solution, there's something wrong with you. You don't understand our solution. This stops being reasonable discourse about the web and starts getting into cult territory. I have a lot of personal experience with cults. I have been in a cult. I have known people very close to me in the past who were in cults. I know some people that I suspect are still in cults. I understand the psychology around cults. And the Tailwind fan community, it really borderlines on cult-like behavior sometimes, and that frankly kind of scares me. We should be able to have reasonable discussions around the best way to design web applications, and we should all be able to agree that the closer we can get to web specs, the closer we can get to how browser engines actually function, the closer we can get to concepts like right to inspect, which is essentially that as the person downloading your website, I should be able to understand the code that's being generated by your website and sent to me. I should be able to understand the code that's running in the browser. That's right to inspect. We should be able to just all agree on some baseline principles here of how the web does operate and should operate. And the fact that we keep having these ridiculous, fallacious arguments over and over and over again. I mean, to say things like, one person said something like, there's no right way to write CSS or something to that effect. Like, there's no standard way to write CSS. And I'm like, really? Isn't there a CSS specification? Isn't there MDN? Like, you can go look up how to write CSS written by people who are very close to the specifications of CSS. I'm pretty sure there's a standard way to write CSS. You cannot like the standard way. You can come up with some other strange system of naming classes or, building some kind of system that's based off of attributes or, whatever you want to do. There's lots of different things you can do with CSS. But we should all be able to have some baseline agreements about what CSS is and what the open specifications are and how CSS is designed to be used and how it works in a browser. I feel like, in a way, this conversation kind of ejects out of web development conversations and into more of we have a real problem in our society where people can't trust expertise. Like, people just flat out don't think expertise is out there and should be respected. Like, if scientists who know what they're talking about and have spent their whole lives studying a particular field of science say some things about their field of science, we should probably listen to them and respect them and likely agree with them unless we ourselves are scientists. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a real problem with not respecting and understanding expertise in our society, and that bleeds into web development. We don't respect the people that develop web specifications. We don't respect any authority like that. We just think like, people can just come up with stuff and invent stuff, and it's like, it's art, man, and we can just do whatever, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, if that works for you, but I consider myself a web developer. I develop for the web, so I care about how the web is actually built. And well, folks, I ran out of batteries on my main cameras here, so I'm on my iPhone. I will have to cut my rant short because, not using my main camera anymore, holding an iPhone, that's not great. Anyway, my point is, I want to be a web developer that actually learns how to write the web technologies in my website the way that the web specifications have been written. Imagine that. I don't understand why that's controversial. I really don't. I don't understand why, like, wanting to use vanilla technologies, vanilla CSS, vanilla JS, vanilla HTML as much as possible, I don't understand why that's controversial. I really don't get it, but whatever, folks. I'm just going to keep making these videos, and people might keep roasting me, and I'll just make more videos because, it's fun. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in, and until next time, bye-bye.